Hi, good day, filmmakers. How are you today? It is Monday, so it's time for Filmmaker to Filmmaker. And today I have a question that I'm going to jump into immediately, which is about screenwriting. And I had a aspiring filmmaker write to me to say that they're working on a screenplay. They understand the rules of dramaturgy. I think that means they understand the idea of the three-act structure. They get all that. But they're having problems putting it together to be an actual screenplay. So how do you write a screenplay? How do you take your ideas and actually turn it into an amazing screenplay? And you have an idea of the movie, but what do you do? So I'm going to talk about that today because I actually teach screenwriting. I love to teach screenwriting. I consider myself a screenwriter first. Before I directed films, it was writing stories that obsessed me and writing movies. So this is probably my first passion in a way. How do you write a screenplay if you've just got the ideas and now you want to put them into a screenplay format? The first thing that I recommend you do, like obviously there's all these kinds of rules. There's books like Save the Cat or Screenplay by Sid Field that will give you the rules of screenwriting. And they will tell you, like this needs to happen by this page, that needs to happen by that. I go, like in a way I find that more helpful after writing the screenplay. You'll have to understand some of those rules. Definitely, it's kind of like if you're a carpenter and you're going to make a table, you have to understand how a table functions and what it's for. Hey, Matt, it's nice of you. So you have to understand what a table, what a table looks like and what it's for and how it functions so that you can make one. But then you can make a table however you want to, right? So here's the deal. I think like knowing the rules is important, but only a little bit. You don't have to obsess about them. And as much as you need to know about the rules is really that screenplays are obviously going to be in 3 acts. So there's going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's going to be between 90 and 110 pages. And I think more than 110 pages these days is indulgent. If you can't tell your story in that, you're probably writing a novel, So like focus on your story. But if you've got this idea of a film that you want to make and you're just like going, okay, how do I turn this into the screenplay? Here's what I recommend you do. First of all is just identify the kind of film that you want to make, all right? So that's sort of going to yourself, is this a big movie? Is it a smaller independent movie? Is it an action film? Is it a rom-com? Try to write down 5 to 10 movies that you think it's like in some way. Like, what is this story like? And every movie's like something. I mean, people say there's only 7 plots. So just identify, and they might be like your movie in tone, they might be like, for many different reasons, but just try to identify 5 films that you think your film is kind of in that ballpark, The next thing that I recommend you do after you have figured out sort of like what kind of film, you're making, is that you should read a screenplay of one of those films. And that can just help you just click into sort of like the underlying structure of it, how they're making it work, okay? After you've done that, the next thing that I recommend you do, if you've got the idea for your screenplay, is dig into the characters. I don't think you can start writing a screenplay until you know your characters inside out. Okay, and so what I recommend is that you write bios for each of your main characters. And when I say write bios, I mean it. Like, where were they born? Who were their parents? Like, what were their dreams when they were a kid? What were their nightmares? What were they most afraid of? When they were at school, what were they like? Were they the kind of kid that played attention? Were they the kind of kid that looked like they would do well? How did that change as they grew up? I think you cannot know too much about your characters. And that story comes from character. Once you know your characters inside and out, the story will become clearer and clearer to you. Because basically, any film that exists is like the most exciting part of someone's life. Like if that fictional character was a real person, like the 2 hours that you spend with them in the movie is the most exciting thing that happened to them, right? And the most exciting thing that happened to them is also going to be the most transformative. It's the time in their life that they go through the most change. Even if you're working with a real indie movie where you're thinking, my character doesn't really change. It's like stuff happens to them, but they don't change. That's okay. I get it. Like Manchester at Sea or something. But I go, still there's some shift. There's something that goes on. There's something about this period of time that is the reason you're focusing on. And so to me, obviously everyone always talks about the goals of characters, right? What does your main character want? That is a good question. What do they want? I think it's also a good question to ask, what do they not want? And I think it's also a good question to ask, what are they most afraid of? Because basically in the space of your movie, they're going to have to face their worst fear. Like, that's what happens in films. And whether their worst fear is that they'll be alone, whether their worst fear is that they will lose all their money, whether their worst fear is that they will die. They are going to have to come up against it. If their worst fear is just death in general, whatever it is, that is like their driving fear, that is something that is going to have to be exposed in the film, they're going to have to face. So once you do these bios, you're not just looking for those kind of all the nice things about your character, you're also really looking for their weaknesses, their flaws, their vulnerabilities, all right? Because those are like the key to discovering what your story will be. Because really, once you know your main character and you know what their flaws are and their vulnerabilities are, it becomes very clear who they have to meet. Right? If you have a character, like my first film, the main character, he's like obsessed with the past and he just wants to go back to the past and he doesn't want to go to the future. So the minute you know this, you go, okay, he has to meet someone who's just like always moving forward to the future. Who's like, hates the past, doesn't want to remember the past, wants to move ahead, right? And the minute you have that, you have conflict. And when you have conflict, you have drama. And when you have drama, you have a movie. All right? So, doing those character bios, and you start with your main character and then build out from them, but figure out that first person and figure out what they need around them, to give them conflict, to expose their difficulties and give them a hard time. So once you've done your character bios, the next step for you is to really start outlining, to crack out your cards. All right, so if you've done your bio, you've done that, you know what kind of film it is that you want to do, the next thing that I encourage you to do is to just like start writing on cards. I personally, I'm thinking, do I have an example? This is like, I didn't really plan to do this, but I do actually have like a bit of a board here of something that I was working on. I wonder if I'm going to be able to get it out. My kid's board is in front of it. So here, for example, is a bit of a board that I've been working on for a story. And so you can see, like the cards themselves, I don't write a ton of information. I'm wondering if I can just show you, it's like Thanksgiving with Allison and Nora, like it doesn't really mean anything to you unless you know what it's about, right? There's a great one. It's like, O is pissed, right? So basically I'm just writing down like the main thing that happens in that scene. And what I recommend is that you do that, you just crack out your cards and you start writing, like write down every scene that that exists in the film, and it might not be in order. It might just be like, I know there's going to be some sort of conflict about this, or they're going to go to the desert and this is, they're going to have this kind of scene. So just write down everything that put it on a card, each individual moment on a card, and start like putting them on a board like that. Also then once you have that, you can start from the beginning and make sure that you outline at least the first 10 scenes before you start writing your story. Now, I think once you do that, like the process of writing a screenplay should be fun, right? You're going on a journey with the character. Like ultimately the audience will go on the journey with them. But in the first case, you're going on the journey with them, right? And I just go, enjoy the process and don't be beholden to rules. Don't worry about rules. Don't worry about this needs to happen by this page, that needs to happen by that. Like just forget all that, right? And instead focus on getting your pages done at this point. And there's a great strength in just saying, I am going to write, and I'm going to write 4 pages a day, every single day until this thing is done, right? And this is how I do my first drafts. I totally do the 4 pages a day, 5 days a week. So that's 20 pages a week. And then 5 weeks, you've got a draft, okay? And that is what I encourage you to do, and not overthink it. Okay, and that's a big key, because when we start to like get into that critical headspace, we start to question what we're doing. We start to question, like, is this right? Should this be happening? Wait, is the first act too long? This is the critical mind. This is a critic's mind, right? You don't want to be in a critic's mind when you're writing a first draft. You want to be in a creative mind. You want to be in a playful mind. You want to be just in a place of like letting the story unfold. I have a curious feeling when I'm writing a screenplay. I don't feel like I'm creating it. I feel much more like I'm discovering it. And I don't know if you like that difference, but I go, it's more like archaeology. It's like I'm uncovering something that already exists, So you just want to let the script reveal itself to you in this process. And you do that by not judging it too much, by not being overly critical, by not trying to force it in a box. And you might like at the end of that first draft have a god-awful mess, right? You might have 110 pages of like, oh my God, what is this thing, right? It's all over the place. That is okay. Because basically screenwriting is rewriting. Everybody knows this, right? Writing is rewriting. The first draft, your job is really just to like, in a way, your first draft is a discovery draft. It's when you discover what this is, what it wants to be and what it needs to be. So your job is just to get it on the page, and not overthink it. Enjoy that process so much. So I hope this helps you a little bit. I hope this just gives the screenwriter who wrote to me, who said, I just don't know how to get it out. I actually teach a class here. I've taught it for a couple of years now for people writing a screenplay. And the goal of the class is to write a screenplay in 8 weeks. And dozens of students have gone through this process. The class always is full. And, like most people do it. And I have this thing, like when I first started writing screenplays, my very first screenplay, people would say to me, which did sell and very nearly got made, people would say to me, well, how long did it take you to write? And I would say, well, it took 8 weeks over 3 years. Because I had that classic experience as a screenwriter where I would write a little bit, as a beginning screenwriter, where I would write a little bit and then I would get I would get blocked, I would get freaked out, I would think, I don't know what I'm doing, this is rubbish, it's never going to go anywhere, what's the point? I don't know how to get past this bit, I don't know how this is going to, what happens for the next 20 pages, I can't do this, and I would put it away, but it just kept niggling me, so I kept going back to it and kept going back to it, and eventually I did finish it, and it sold. I sold that screenplay. So my goal, with the screenwriters I work with is to make sure that they get it done. And I try to just give them the tools that will get them to that finish line. Because once you have a first draft, you have something to work on. Until you have a first draft, you have nothing. It's just like, it's a dream. Once you get that first draft down, then you have something to work with. And so I encourage the screenwriter who wrote to me, who's like, I don't know how to turn these ideas into a screenplay. I just go, you just give yourself these tasks. You just go like, 1, I'm going to identify the film. I'm going to read some screenplays like this. 2, I'm going to work on the characters, right? I'm going to write bios for these characters and really figure out who they are and what their journeys are, like how they're going to change and what it's about. 3, I'm going to crack out the cards and I'm going to outline this movie, right? And maybe I'm not going to outline everything, but you need to at least have the beginning and the end, okay? You need the first 10 scenes or so, and then you need the ending. You need to know where you're going. Next, right? Like once you've done that, start writing your screenplay and just hold yourself accountable. Just set yourself a goal. And as I say, my goal usually when I'm doing a first draft, 4 pages a day, 5 days a week, weekends off, right? And I think like just setting yourself into a rhythm like that and just making it very doable. You're not trying to write 20 pages a day. There's just a structure. You make yourself just hold to it. And I always say this thing, when you get into that phase, you give yourself permission to write the worst garbage ever. It's okay. There's days when I'm writing a first draft where I'm literally like, this is the worst version of this scene. This could not be worse, but it's okay because I know that I can go back and fix it later. So once you get into that phase, just write that scene. Once you have then your first draft, you have something to work on. Then you can we can talk about that another day, like what you do afterwards. But the goal initially is just get the first draft down, and then you can work on it and finesse it and make it into something that's amazing. So I hope this has been helpful. Thank you to the screenwriter who wrote to me with this question. I'm rooting for you. If you have other specific questions around that would be helpful to you in this process, please reach out to me, okay? Just email me. I did email you and ask you a few further questions about what you're trying to do. Please do email me and if you have any further questions. But that's the process that I recommend. And just if you're watching this, I'm going to be putting this, I've started to put these up on YouTube so that people can watch them after the live. This is shared on Instagram stories, obviously, and then it's available on Instagram stories for 24 hours. But afterwards, I will put it up on YouTube. And I just want to let you know that very soon, I am going to be opening registration for a screenwriting course, which is the very first time I've done it online. And it's going to be very much like what I teach in person. So it's an 8-week program in which you write a first draft. And each week in this program, you will receive, once a week on Monday, you will receive a video training that's your lesson for the week that will cover everything that you need to know for that week and give you homework so that you have a very clear sense of what you have to do each week. And then you just do it. And then there's also going to be a Facebook group specifically for people that sign up for that course so that they can join together and support each other. And I'll go into the Facebook group. I'm thinking I'll probably do a Facebook Live once a week where people can ask questions. But most importantly, you hold yourself accountable. And I have this thing, when I've taught this class live, most people finish their screenplay, right? And these are people, some of them have written screenplays before, many have not. So this course will be suitable for people who've never written a screenplay and you just want to write a screenplay. So registration is going to open on that soon. If this is interesting to you at all, if this method and this approach appeals to you, make sure that you're on my email list. And I will be sure to let you know when registration opens so you can join us. It's going to be awesome. I'm actually this time planning to write a screenplay with you. So I will be going through the process at the same time as you. So that will be awesome. All right. So I hope that has been helpful for you. To the screenwriter who wrote to me, good luck. All right. You can do this. And stay in touch and let me know if that helps you. And for everybody, just keep making your movies, keep doing awesome work out there.